And so we're focusing on vaccine development for infections associated with autoimmune disease, and really combining this knowledge from my previous training to understand how the immune system normally recognises a threat that mimics our own tissues and why this goes wrong in infection-associated autoimmunity, and how we can utilise this knowledge to safely and effectively make vaccines that can prevent these diseases. Hi, I'm Debbie Burnett. I'm a Scientia Senior Lecturer and Lab Head in the School of Biomedical Sciences at UNSW. So I originally trained as a veterinarian, and I really love being a veterinarian. I love animals, but what I found it somewhat frustrating. And in particular, there was actually a moment when I was treating a dog with myasthenia gravis. We were giving the dog all the correct therapies and we're doing everything absolutely right, and the dog was getting worse. And that was really a turning point in my life, because I realised I didn't want to be on the side of medicine, of applying therapies. I wanted to be actually at the forefront and trying to understand why these diseases happen and how we can actually prevent them. I also realised at that point in time that I wanted to make discoveries that were not just applicable for any one particular species, but as a whole. And so that was when I transitioned from being a clinical veterinarian into medical research, trying to make discoveries that I hoped would benefit eventually both humans and animals. I did my undergraduate training at University of Sydney, both in veterinary science and science. I then did an honours at WeHi. I then worked as a vet for several years in New Zealand before coming back to Australia, undertaking my PhD at the Garvan Institute, and I eventually started my lab at UNSW Sydney. My PhD began focusing on autoimmunity research, and specifically I was focused on self-non-self discrimination in B cells. So how B cells specifically recognise foreign threats and how they produce an antibody response to a pathogen mimicking self. And so what we found is that actually in a normal context, self-reactive B cells can play a role in protective immunity. And this has been quite pivotal for vaccine development in infections that mimic our own tissues. So during COVID-19, I actually pivoted my research to focus more specifically on vaccines. And so we were involved in a vaccine development effort for COVID-19, and I've since been involved in vaccine developments for other important pathogens, including E. coli associated with urinary tract infections. So actually, the majority of the focus of my team at the moment is combining these two research interests. And so we're focusing on vaccine development for infections associated with autoimmune disease, and really combining this knowledge from my previous training to understand how the immune system normally recognises a threat that mimics our own tissues and why this goes wrong in infection-associated autoimmunity, and how we can utilise this knowledge to safely and effectively make vaccines that can prevent these diseases. Yeah, we collaborate with quite a few different groups, both across Australia and internationally, and this really focuses on several different disease development efforts that we're involved in. So in terms of vaccine development, we're collaborating with University of Melbourne and several other, the Peter Doherty Institute in Melbourne, as well as UNSW in a Hep C vaccine development effort. We're also collaborating with UTS and Macquarie University on a vaccine development effort to make a vaccine against uropathogenic E. coli. We are also collaborating in the context of autoimmunity and really infection-associated autoimmune diseases. And this is really focusing in our current interest towards rheumatic heart disease, where we're really working with many groups, both in Australia and some larger international collaborations, really focused on working together to access rare patient samples and precious patient samples towards helping to solve rheumatic heart disease. We also have clinician efforts and collaborations with St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney, where we're actually working on a collaboration to help solve Guillain-Barré syndrome. My work has been funded through the NHMRC, through an EL1 and EL2 and investigator grants. We've also been funded through Ramaciotti and the Office of Health and Medical Research. We've also received funding from the MRFF. It's really incredible being at the forefront of human medicine, able to make discoveries that we hope can directly lead to impacts in human health. It's also really incredible being able to work in these collaborative teams and also support the career development of more junior fellows as they develop their own research careers. I have several unusual hobbies. So one of my major passions outside of medical research is wildlife care. And so I'm an active wildlife carer with Sydney Metropolitan Wildlife. I raise orphaned ringtail possums for release. I currently have 2 ringtail possums in a cage in my backyard, being just raised until they're ready to be released back in the wild. I also love all kinds of craft, and I cycle through different craft hobbies. My current one is wheel pottery, which I'm terrible at, but absolutely enjoy.